we not only care about the 100% of New Zealanders today, we care about the generations yet to come. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Our first reaction to this budget was to call the Serious Fraud Office. Never in the history of this country has a government so blatantly cooked the books. And it wasn't even clever. This is financial deceit on a grand scale. The boast about balancing the books would see a company accountant in the court being prosecuted for fraud. Any balance towards the black, out of the red, is achieved first by selling assets like Mighty River Power and soon Meridian in October this year, with more state assets yet to come, and second, by not spending significant amounts in last year's budget on key items like health, education, overseas aid, as well as deliberately delaying treaty settlements promised in last year's expenditure. So why would anyone trust today's announcement? Last year, for example, they got up and said they were going to spend so much on all these items. Well, this is what happened. NZ aid, that's our international standing, underspent by 96 million, a massive amount, deliberately so. Then you got Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, a massive 91 million underspent. Education, a massive 64 million underspent. Health, a massive 57 million. Item after item of non-expenditure promised last year to give you some artificial surplus promises in 2013, 1 year later. Mr Key, Mr English and Mr Joyce will claim that this budget is responsible, prudent, fit for our times, brings gains after 5 years of pain. It is next year's surplus and it's a confidence booster. But I noticed that there are a lot of nervous MPs right now sitting in their offices because they know that this rescue craft won't get them home in 2014. That's what they claim. Responsible, prudent, fit for our times, brings gains after 5 years, brings next year's surplus. It's a confidence booster. Not one of those claims is true. Here are the facts. This budget is consistent with every budget since 2009. But if that has any merit, why, since the 2008 era of the three financial stooges, have more than 200,000, mainly young New Zealanders, left New Zealand? Not one of those backbenchers or ministers can front that bald, glaring, stark fact. What has happened to the 170,000 jobs in 4 years promised by John Key in the 2011 campaign? What's happened to the export-led growth promised in the, quotes, rebalanced economy, end of quotes? If any of today's claims had merit, there would be positive answers to those simple three questions. Over 200,000 Kiwis have left New Zealand because they can't get a job in their own country. Of the 170,000 jobs promised, Mr Key and Mr English and Mr Joyce have found 8,000. 8,000. As for export-led growth, well, the difference between our income from exports against our payments for imports and interest payments is a giant black $10 billion hold, unparalleled by any other first world economy. Terrible. Worse than Portugal, worse than Ireland, worse than Greece, worse than Spain. Portugal, Ireland, Greece, Spain, the so-called pigs. Well, if they are pigs, what has National made New Zealand? We know and we'll tell you. Mr Speaker, again the Three Stooges claim there will be GDP growth. In short, the economy is growing somewhere between 2 to 3%. Now, much of that is from the Christchurch rebuild. I notice that now we're second in the Pacific of the Pacific Island countries, including Australia. Australia first, way ahead of us. Then New Caledonia on 3.4. Then New Zealand. How did that happen? Much as that of the growth will come from the Christchurch rebuild. But apart from Fletcher's, who's getting the benefit of this growth? Who's benefiting? An elite handful, domestic and foreign, or the mass majority of ordinary, everyday Kiwis? And the answer's clear. Since 2008, per capita incomes, that's wages or earnings per person, has barely moved. Ordinary Kiwis are struggling. Meanwhile, the cost of everyday living has skyrocketed. Electricity, rates, insurance, the shopping basket, you name it, it's all gone up. And don't boast about interest rates. Kiwis are paying 4 times the home interest rates of the US, Britain, Japan and Europe, and twice the credit card rates. So what, pray tell me, are these geniuses, Mr. Key, Mr. English and Joyce, what have they turned us into? They have created an economy that reduces the mass majority of New Zealanders to the status of mice on a treadmill. They have created an economy that reduces the massive majority of New Zealanders to the status of mice on a treadmill. It's a bit like this. You see? It's a bit like this. They have to run faster and faster to stay in the same place. The rich and powerful elite that run the world's financial system created a global economic crisis. I know that some of my National Party critics recognise the animal in this. It's called Stephen. It's got hair, so it must be a young Stephen. But I know what they recognise. There's something that they see an affinity to. They have to run fast and fast to stay in the same place. Ordinary people pay the price. This is a budget devised by the rich and the powerful for the rich and the powerful. The rest of us stay like mice on a treadmill. The rest of us stay like a mice on a treadmill. Mr. Banks never even got up to clap his leader. Oh, strangely silent. Oh, mind you, so was the Maori Party. So was the United Party. There they were, all sitting, not prepared to salute their leader. The rest of us stay like a mice on the treadmill. If we look back at our recent history, the road New Zealanders have been forced to follow has always led to this treadmill, like a mouse chasing a bit of cheese. Look, just because you saw your relation, because you see your relation, don't get so excited. It started with Roger Douglas. You know, in the 80s, when Labour threw New Zealanders to the wolves of the world, guided by the half-baked theories of mad monetarists, they came to the conclusion, now, Mr. Banks, for you, it's sir over here. I mean, we're staying here after next election. You're going. You're a goner. Mr. Banks, your party is toast. They came to the conclusion, these mad monetarists, that the only road to success was to secretly restructure the place and sell it. What they actually did was start the first run of the treadmill. In the 90s, the National Party promised, Mr. Banks was there, we promised to stop the treadmill. But in reality, we made the treadmill spin faster. New Zealand first slowed it down in 1996 when we came to power. And to be fair, our reformed Labour tried to keep the brakes on between 1999 and 2008. But of late, the same rogues are back in place, and the treadmill started again, and it's picking up speed. Mr. Speaker, we have to stop the treadmill, take New Zealanders off it, and give them a real economic and social future. Our once great history was one of nation building and looking after our people. This government is selling Mighty Repower and Meridian Energy to put money in a future investment fund. It's all there in the speech. That fund is used to pay for schools, health and the like. Those things used to come from the Consolidated Fund. That means that past generations are paying now to keep the country afloat. So thanks, Grandad and Grandmum. You built those power stations. Now you're going to build all these new things while these people try a giant creative accounting fraud on the people of New Zealand. Don't forget, the surplus next year is created by swallowing up nearly all the mighty river power float. The surplus is $75 million for 2014-15. What was the price of mighty river power? $1.7 billion. So they're $1,675 million short, and he has the audacity as a Treasury trained person with a fiscal responsibility bill before a select committee to get up here and thinks he can pull that con on the country. How do we lose our great vision? Why is New Zealand today a high-priced, low-wage economy? Many of our workers are in jobs that pay wages upon which they and their families cannot survive. Recently, this government gave the mighty river power directors pay rises of 70%, or more than $45,000 a year. The workers were given a rise of 25 cents an hour. Another spin on the treadmill, Mr. Banks. There was a time when lead managers of New Zealand power operations got 4 times the workers' wages. Today, it's 30 times the workers' wages. And if I was in the Maori Party or the ACT Party or the United Party, if I was the National Party backbencher, I wouldn't laugh at that. Because all I can see is electoral suicide when I hear those figures. And you'll hear more about that as the months roll by. No wonder these egregious, self-serving few are cheering from the rafters. Sure, there are a few crumbs thrown to the mice today. Even the mice have to be kept alive. But it's really hard for the strugglers. We've already shown the plight of the workers. Not only do they have to survive on low wages, they have to compete against a flood of cheap imports made by cheap labour. And if I was going to court shortly to explain why I got 42 checks and I can't remember one of them, I'd keep my mouth shut.
So would I.
I would spend all my time with my barrister. I would get myself a psychologist to try and explain deliberate amnesia. I would not be here barracking the fastest growing political movement in New Zealand called New Zealand First. Oh, we all know it's true. Half the ACT Party people wanted to come and join New Zealand First. And I said, no, we will not have fascists. Families are hit with higher food costs. Name one. What about the man called Eckhoff, who was an MP for the ACT Party? He wanted to join us. Man, Eckhoff is an MP. He doesn't even know him, because when Eckhoff was with a good member for the ACT Party, he wasn't even a member of it. Oh, no, geez. He's only a temporary fill-in, we know that. Mr. Banks, keep quiet. You never were any good at this game. The household disposable income forecasts in this budget are an illusion. What about the manufacturers and exporters? Running to stand still on a treadmill of soaring costs and overvalued dollar. And you know, sometimes you've got to have luck on your side, because today our Reserve Bank bill got drawn again for the second time in 2 years, which is an all-time record. And we feel that the force is with us. And our message to the manufacturers and to the exporters is, hang on, men and women out there in manufacturing and on farms. Help's on its way. What about small business? What about small business? Go to the industrial suburbs of our cities, the Patonis. There are streets of empty warehouses and factories. What about the police? We gave them an extra frontline 1,000 extra when we were last in the reins of power. Nationalists cutting these numbers back. The crime ministry is being contracted out to the criminals. Everyone knows, except the ninth floor of the Beehive, that Whānau Ora provides funds to the mongrel mob.
That's right.
We all know that. What about health services? What about home help for the elderly? Everyone's on a treadmill except the government's fat cat mates. They live off the struggle and the sweat of mice on the treadmill. The housing crisis continues with a few patchwork and piecemeal ideas revealed in this budget. The very idea of cheap infill housing sends a shudder through everybody and anybody who's seen the industrial housing estates of Britain and Europe. The government's idea of infill housing will create giant transit camps across Auckland. The results overseas show these housing estates become breeding grounds for crime, poverty and misery. And what about the elephant in the room, about which nobody in this country will speak except New Zealand First? We know that mass immigration is being used to prop up New Zealand's consumer demand on our economy and to replace massive Kiwi flight abroad. Most of these new arrivals are going straight to Auckland. Auckland's got a giant housing and infrastructure and roading problem, none of which our biggest city will ever solve until we address the elephant in the room that a sea of political correctness dare not face. We don't want the young pup from out there in Howard to tell us we're solving it. This fellow knows nothing about these issues.
No.
You know, I've seen so many people like you, my good friend, who have come and go like lightning. I'll make you a guarantee. I'll be here long after you're gone. I'll be here long after you're gone.
Order.
And I want it to be very, very long. I don't intend to stay forever.
Into the debate.
But I guarantee I'll be here long after he's gone. Now, what has this budget done for Heartland New Zealand? The engine room of the economy. The place that feeds New Zealand's wealth. Nothing. Donuts. The government's economic policies are geared to shift the population to Auckland. What about Northland, Hawke's Bay, Otago, Westland, Southland, the places that used to have vibrant, thriving communities? What about Wellington? The genius, Stephen Joyce, the Minister of Regional Development, has been so dynamic, he's destroyed the economy of the capital city.
That's right.
His leader says it's dying. The regions keep New Zealand afloat, but this government ignores them. Last week they were gloating over unemployment figures, down from the record quarter before that. Again, clutching at straws. Maori unemployment, about 4%. Pacific, 15%. Teenage employment, 26% of people aged 15 to 19 are unemployed. The National Party's answer today, backed by the Maori Party, of these thousands of young Maori who can't get a job, and Polynesians and Europeans and all other people in this country, there's 100 more cadet places. Up from 250 to 350. Not 100, not 1,000, just 100 more. They're standing on the dole score waiting to go to the treadmill. For the majority of New Zealanders, this government's done nothing. Pinning its hopes on asset sales, pandering to rich tourists. While ordinary people struggle, the government gives cash to casinos and handouts to Hollywood. While Kiwis leave, the government is repopulating this country from everywhere else, and they're all going to Auckland. The current account deficit is a disaster, the worst in the first world. It's a staggering sum, our government debt, 57 billion now, going towards 70 billion. And private debt's a nightmare. There's nothing in this budget that starts to develop a pathway out of that debt. It exposes just how incapable the government is of coming to grips with the economic challenges facing New Zealand. The GDP growth is actually very average given our low performance in the past. There were some sweeteners trotted out today, but it keeps the mice on the treadmill. It keeps the fat cats feeding on them. And the ministers keep cooking the books. And against the cacophony of the clapping of the clowns on the cabinet benches and the braying of the backbenchers, it would be funny but would not so serious. We notice the Klingons remain strangely mute, strangely silent. We want to make an appeal to the National Party rank and file members. I want to talk to those members of the National Party that were there when I was once a member of a great party called National. I remember that party when it had great policies, great principles, and great practical politicians and leaders, when even its enemies used to respect it. But this National Party is not the party of Hamilton. It's not the party of Holland. It's not the grand old party of Holyoake. This is the National Party of Madoff, Merrill Lynch and money speculators. We appeal to those left with a conscience in the National Party to remember when Keith Holyoake stopped Rupert Murdoch buying the Dominion newspaper. He said we had to own our own country, and we still do. We urge people in the National Party out there to remember what the country was like when their party was great, and it is no more. Now, my challenge to them today is this. Are we men and women, or are we mice, as the National Party and its Klingons would make us? Well, we are men, and we have a spirit. And New Zealand First makes this promise here today. Back us, and we'll guarantee an outcome that gets you off the treadmill. Back us, and your young people have hope. back us, and you will get to decide the outcome of the 2014 election. No other political party can make that promise. Back us, and we'll hold the balance of political responsibility, and we'll use it properly.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Peter Sharples.
Mr.